January 29th, 2022, 6 in the morning. A snowstorm just passed over Canton, Massachusetts. On a quiet front lawn, 3 people are searching in the dark. Then they find him, a man lying in the snow, not moving, not breathing. His name is John O'Keefe, a Boston police officer, a father figure to his niece and nephew. And in just a few hours, his death would set off one of the most watched criminal cases in American history. The woman who found him that morning was his girlfriend. Her name is Karen Red. Within days, police would call her a killer. She would call herself a victim of a cover-up. And for the next 4 years, the whole country would be forced to pick a side. This is the full story of what happened, what was said in court, and what is still happening right now. Who is Karen Red? Before the snow, before the trials, before the cameras outside the courthouse, there were just 2 people. Karen Reed worked in finance. She had also taught classes at a local college. Nobody outside her small circle knew her name. She was, by every account, an ordinary woman living an ordinary life in Massachusetts. John O'Keefe was different in one way. He wore a badge. 16 years on the Boston police force. After his sister passed away, he stepped in and raised her 2 children as his own. People who knew him describe a steady man, a protector, someone who put family above everything else. The 2 had been a couple for about 2 years. Like most relationships, it had good days and bad days. Nothing that stood out, nothing that hinted at what was coming. Then came one night in January, a night that started with drinks among friends, and ended with a death that nobody could fully explain. The night John O'Keefe died, January 28th, 2022, Friday night, Karen Reed and John O'Keefe went out drinking at 2 different bars in Canton. Nothing unusual, just friends, drinks, and conversation. Later that night, the group made plans to continue the party, this time at a private home. The house belonged to a man named Brian Albert. He was also a Boston police officer. According to Reed, she drove O'Keefe to that house. She says she dropped him off outside. He stepped out of the car, and that, she claims, is the last time she ever saw him alive. She says she drove away. Hours passed. He did not answer her calls. He did not answer her texts. So she went looking for him along with 2 friends. Just before 6 in the morning, they found him, lying in the snow, on the front lawn of the very house he was supposed to be partying inside. He was rushed to the hospital, but it was already too late. John O'Keefe was gone. His body showed a serious head injury, and strange cuts and scrapes along one arm. From that single morning, 2 completely different stories were about to be born. One would send Karen Red to trial for murder. The other would turn her into one of the most defended women in America. The investigation and the charges. Police moved fast, and their focus landed almost immediately on one person, Karen Red. Investigators say they found broken pieces of a tail light near where O'Keefe's body was discovered. They say the pieces match damage found on Reed's SUV. They pulled data from her vehicle. Prosecutors later claimed that data showed sudden, aggressive movement around the time O'Keefe would have died. Then came the words. At the hospital and in the days after, Reed reportedly said something that sounded like a confession forming in real time. Prosecutors say she appeared to wonder out loud whether she might have hit him with her own car. By June 2022, the case had a name and it had charges. Second-degree murder, manslaughter while under the influence, leaving the scene of an accident causing death. Karen Reed pleaded not guilty to all of it, and she said something that would define the next 4 years of her life. She said she was being framed. Her defense team built an entirely different version of that night. They claimed O'Keefe never left that house alive. They alleged he was killed inside during a fight. Then his body, they said, was carried outside and left on the lawn to make it look like a hit and run. And why would police cover this up? Because the defense argued the man hosting the party was one of their own. Then one name surfaced that would change the entire shape of this case. Michael Proctor, the state trooper leading the investigation. Private text messages he had sent about Karen Reed later came out in court. They were not professional. They were not neutral. They mocked her appearance. They mocked her mental state. They used language no investigator should ever use about the person they are supposed to be objectively investigating. Suddenly, the defense had more than just a theory. They had proof that the man building the case against Red may have already decided she was guilty before the investigation even began. The stage was set, and the whole country was about to watch it play out live. The Google search that divided the courtroom. Sometimes, the smallest piece of evidence becomes the biggest argument in an entire trial. In this case, that piece of evidence was a single Google search. The search was found on the phone of Jennifer McCabe, one of the people with Reed when O'Keefe's body was discovered. The words, misspelled, read something close to this: "How long to die in cold." Someone, hours before O'Keefe was officially found, appeared to search how long a person could survive outside in freezing weather. The defense pointed to the timestamp, 2:27 in the morning. That was hours before O'Keefe's body was supposedly discovered near 6 a.m. If that timestamp was accurate, it raised a chilling question. Did someone already know he was outside, dying, long before anyone admitted to finding him? The prosecution fought back immediately. Their own digital forensics expert took the stand and argued that phone data does not always record search times the way people assume. She told the jury the search likely happened later, closer to 6:24 in the morning, right around the time O'Keefe was actually found. Two experts, one phone, two completely different timelines, and a jury left to decide which one to believe. This single search became a symbol for the entire trial, because from here on, almost every piece of evidence would be argued the exact same way. Each side brought their own expert. Each expert read the same data, and each one walked away with the opposite conclusion. With the battle lines drawn this sharply, it was time for the first trial to begin. The first trial. Spring 2024. Dedham, Massachusetts. Outside the courthouse, something unusual was happening. Hundreds of people showed up. Not for a celebrity trial. Not for a political case. For Karen Reed. They wore pink, her favorite color. They held signs. Free Karen Red. This was not a one-day event. It happened again and again for 2 straight months. Inside the courtroom, prosecutors laid out their case piece by piece. The tail light fragments, the vehicle data, testimony from people who were at the party. A crash reconstruction expert for the state told the jury that Reed's SUV would have needed to be moving at nearly 24 miles an hour to cause O'Keefe's injuries. Then the defense went to work. A police officer from a neighboring department testified that photos of the tail light taken later at the police station showed more damage than what he had personally seen earlier that same day. The implication hung in the air. Had evidence been altered? Then came Dr. Marie Russell, a retired emergency room physician with decades of experience treating dog bites. She looked at the cuts on O'Keefe's arm and told the jury her opinion. These were not injuries from a car. These, she said, were bite marks, teeth and claw patterns consistent with an attack from a dog, pointed straight at one animal. The Albert family's German Shepherd, named Chloe. Jennifer McCabe took the stand too. She described what she called constant harassment against her and her family throughout the case, including people repeatedly driving past her home. The judge reminded jurors that there was no proof Reed had organized this. But it was already clear. This case had grown far bigger than a courtroom. Weeks passed. The jury went into deliberation. And then, Silence turned into deadlock. They could not agree. In July 2024, the judge declared a mistrial. No verdict, no resolution. Karen Reed was not guilty, but she was not innocent either. Not yet, not on paper. The case would have to be tried all over again. The fight over a second trial. Before a single new witness could be called, Reed's lawyers made one last attempt to end the entire case without a retrial. Their argument was called double jeopardy. In simple terms, they said the first jury had already quietly agreed she was not guilty of murder and not guilty of leaving the scene. They had only been stuck on the manslaughter charge. So putting her through a full retrial on all three charges again, they argued, was unfair and against the law. This question went all the way to the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court, the highest court in the state. For a moment, everything hung in the balance. If the court agreed, the most serious charges against Reed could disappear forever without ever facing a jury again. The court ruled against her. The retrial would happen. And this time, both sides knew exactly what they were walking into: the second trial and the verdict. Spring 2025. The cameras came back. So did the crowds outside the courthouse. Nothing about the intensity of this case had faded in a single year. The defense sharpened its strategy. Dr. Russell returned to testify about the dog bite theory, even after prosecutors tried hard to keep her off the stand entirely. The judge ruled that identifying dog bite wounds was not common knowledge for an average person, so her expert opinion was allowed to stand. New details emerged from O'Keefe's phone. A digital forensics expert walked the jury through his exact location that night, showing precisely when his phone stopped moving near a flagpole on the Albert property. Entire days of testimony were spent debating outdoor temperature, battery behavior, and GPS accuracy, all in an attempt to pin down exactly where John O'Keefe was standing in his final hours. Karen Reed gave interviews during breaks in the trial. At one point, she told a reporter simply this: she had nothing to hide. She had been framed. Then, in June 2025, the jury reached its final decision. Not guilty of second-degree murder. Not guilty of manslaughter. Not guilty of leaving the scene of an accident resulting in death. The only charge that stuck was operating a vehicle under the influence of alcohol. The judge sentenced her immediately to 1 year of probation, the standard punishment for a first-time offense. Later, the jury foreman spoke publicly about what happened behind those closed doors. He said his mind was made up early. So early, he said, that he barely felt the need to take notes during the trial. Outside, her supporters erupted into cheers. More than 3 years after John O'Keefe died in the snow, the murder case against Karen Reed was finally over. But her story was not. Why this case became a national obsession. Most murder trials do not become daily television events. This one did, and there is a reason why. One name explains a huge part of it. Aidan Kearney, known online as Turtle Boy. He covered every hearing, every motion, every twist, often before major news outlets even had the story. His coverage built a massive and loyal following, one that believed deeply in Reed's innocence, and one that helped fill the streets outside that courthouse day after day. Then there was the deeper question this case forced people to ask. Could police be trusted to investigate their own? Several people connected to that party were officers themselves, or closely tied to officers. That single fact turned a local Massachusetts case into a symbol for a much bigger national debate. And then there was the friend group itself. Jurors heard about a group vacation to Aruba, taken by Reed, O'Keefe, and several people who would later become key witnesses and even targets of her lawsuits. Testimony described tense arguments on that trip, cracks in the friendships that existed long before that January night. It gave the trial an almost soap opera quality, where the jury was not just judging one incident, but years of complicated relationships boiling over. All of it combined into something rare, a real courtroom case that felt, to millions of viewers, like a true crime series unfolding in real time. With the trial behind her, it was time for Karen Red to face something almost as difficult. Life after the verdict. Life after the acquittal. You might assume that once someone is found not guilty, life simply resets. For Karen Reed, it did not work that way. In interviews after the trial, she said the case cost her nearly everything. Her career, her savings, her home, years of her life that she will never get back. She said she is not currently working, and instead spends almost all of her time on what she called an all-hands-on-deck legal fight. She has also spoken about the strangers who continue to support her. She has said people often will not let her pay for meals or groceries once they recognize her. Whether she is at a restaurant, a hotel, or simply walking down a street in Boston. Her 1 year of probation for the drunk driving charge quietly ended in June 2026. But while that small chapter closed, an even bigger one was just beginning. And this time it was not about her. It was about them, the lawsuits that came next. Karen Reed did not walk away. She turned around and went on the attack. In late 2025, she filed a lawsuit against several key figures from her case. Former trooper Michael Proctor, witness Jennifer McCabe, Officer Brian Higgins. Her legal team alleged these individuals played a direct role in building what she called a wrongful and biased investigation against her. Then, in June 2026, the fight escalated. Reed filed a new lawsuit, this time against entire institutions. The Massachusetts State Police, the Canton Police Department. Her legal team alleged these departments tried to hide what they described as a culture of bias and misconduct running through their ranks. They claimed this culture directly led to her wrongful prosecution, costing her millions of dollars, along with her job, her reputation, and years of emotional distress. The other side did not stay silent. Several of the very witnesses Reed had sued, including members of the Albert and McCabe families and Officer Brian Higgins, filed their own lawsuit. This time against Reed herself and against Turtle Boy. They alleged that online commentary during the case caused lasting damage to their lives, their careers, and their names. The case was later moved into federal court. And then more fuel hit the fire. Investigators uncovered vulgar and offensive text messages exchanged between Michael Proctor and another officer, Sean Good. The fallout was immediate. Proctor lost his official law enforcement certification, and Reed's legal team gained fresh evidence to argue that the original investigation into O'Keefe's death was compromised from the very beginning. What started as one tragic night in the snow had grown into something far larger. Multiple lawsuits, multiple police departments, federal courts, and a widening question about how the entire justice system handled this case from day one. What both sides still disagree on. Even after 2 trials and a final verdict, some questions were never truly answered. What actually happened inside or near the Albert home that night? The jury's not guilty verdict means prosecutors failed to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. It does not prove the defense's version is exactly what happened either. To this day, nobody has produced a clear, agreed-upon account of whether O'Keefe ever went inside that house. Then there is the physical evidence itself. The tail light, the wounds on O'Keefe's arm, 2 sets of experts, same photographs, same physical items, opposite conclusions. The gap between their opinions was so wide that many jurors, and much of the public, walked away feeling like science itself had failed to give a clear answer. And finally, there is the investigation process. Even people who believe Red may have played some role in O'Keefe's death often admit the investigation was mishandled, especially once Michael Proctor's offensive texts came to light. This has created a strange middle ground. where even some skeptics of Reed's innocence still support her lawsuits against the police, simply because they believe that investigation deserves to be questioned, no matter what actually happened that night. These open questions are exactly why this story refuses to end quietly. Where things stand today. As of the middle of 2026, the criminal case against Karen Reed is closed. She was acquitted of the most serious charges. Her probation for the drunk driving conviction has ended. But the civil war around this case is far from over. Discovery, the process where both sides gather evidence and take sworn statements, is still ongoing in multiple lawsuits. It has taken far longer than anyone expected. Judges overseeing these cases have publicly asked lawyers on both sides to stop fighting their battles through the media and social platforms. One judge even pointed out the sheer scale of it all. 22 attorneys now involved in just the civil side of this case. There is political fallout too. The Norfolk County District Attorney, who oversaw the original prosecution, announced he will not seek re-election. Many see it as a sign of just how deeply this case has shaken public trust. For now, there is no ending in sight. Federal lawsuits, police misconduct claims, defamation cases, all moving forward all at the same time. Final thoughts. This was never just a story about one night in the snow outside a house in Canton, Massachusetts. It became a story about trust, about whether police can fairly investigate their own, about how one tragic death can pull an entire nation into years of argument, evidence, and doubt. 2 trials, 1 hung jury, 1 final acquittal, and now, a new set of lawsuits still playing out in courtrooms right now. The full truth of what happened to John O'Keefe that night may never be agreed upon by everyone. But one thing is certain. This case changed every single life it touched. Karen Reed, the Albert family, the McCabe family, the officers whose careers came apart because of it. And somewhere in Massachusetts, right now, the fight is still going on.